In Conjuring The Last Rites, paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren take on their last case within these investigations of this mysterious entities to discover the secrets of the past. Hello and welcome to Cinema, where we focus on a film. I'm Josh, this is Simply Cinema. Let me know down in the comments below what you thought of Conjuring The Last Rites. Was it good, was it bad, or somewhere right in the middle? How does it compare to the rest of the Conjuring franchise as a whole? I'll be having a ranking here soon on this channel, so make sure to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss out on that. But taking it into about Conjuring The Last Rites really opens up this nice haunting atmosphere that leads on to a great ending to the finale. What it builds up to is just really haunting. There's stakes, there's consequences leading on throughout. It shows some of the ideas that lead you to believe that this is one of their toughest cases yet. It's unique with some of its variables that come about the way. You still get the general entities, the supernatural possessions that is similar throughout all the franchise as a whole, but there is still some unique ideas, and this is a closing chapter to the Conjuring franchise, which really opens up a great idea. It succeeds in closing up with a sentimental value to what we're getting out of Ed and Lorraine Warren following throughout the 4 cases and the different spin-offs that we've gotten from the Conjuring universe as a whole. What we get out of Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga show they still have the spotlight for this film, which really highlights their roles, their performances, and shows the true reason that we love why they work so well within these characters, how they perform, all the different things going on throughout. There's different things where we're carrying off from Conjuring 3, certain things with Patrick Wilson playing Ed Warren that still has the heart condition, still has that to be careful with when leading on to this case as well. And there's different things where we're involving more of the daughter of them as well as her boyfriend that's leading on to the characters just as well. And there's just a supporting cast that just does wonderfully with the nature that's going on, and the particular entity case they're solving as a whole shows there's true supernatural depth against this mirror and things that are early on that shows they must choose to use their fullest powers, that things have to be accepting, embracing what the powers of Lorraine Warren truly are to fight off against the evil that is all going on throughout this film. And being based on a true story, it of course shows that there's an ounce of respect that's going on to replicating some of the events, even if they have to twist some things, add in some things to make it more dramatized, because they may not have all the information at hand. That still sustains itself throughout the supernatural forces that you can go in, embrace the scares, and really take on this haunting atmosphere that this film is leading onto as a whole. Which takes me into the mix elements. There's things throughout this film that if you are familiar with the atmosphere, with the true story of this event, you may be a little disregarded by the fact of some things they may have changed, or things are ultimately manipulated to make it more dramatized for the actual environment. And there's things spread throughout the film where you may not necessarily need it to be so long, so dragged out throughout the film, but that's only a case for those that aren't particularly compelled by these characters, by the events at hand, that it is a situational environment where some people may just enjoy everything this film is going in to offer, having these different paranormal activities that is all going on, but also like the down-to-earth drama that's leading on with the build-up to the ending of the film, that leads on with the relatively same formula that you can come to expect with these Conjuring movies. So there's certainly a thing where it could be a miss or a hit, depending on what sort of things you are coming to expect out of this film. It is dragging on with multiple circumstances, with subplots of the investigation itself, but also things that are just going on within the Warren household, starting off with a prologue that leads you on with information of the birth of the daughter of the Warrens, that leads on to things that have to unfold later on within the film that will either really land well with some people or just feel like a bit of a distraction that if you aren't a fan of focusing too much on the Warrens, then it could ultimately be a weak payoff by the end of the film, by where we're leading on to, because it can sacrifice some of that time looking away from the paranormal activity that you're not ultimately paying some time over to the family that is being haunted, that everything that is going on at hand is just being distracted from the focus of the actual story that you're going into a horror movie for. Which takes me into the negatives. Unfortunately, I feel quite disappointed. While I was relieved for how well it managed to pay off within the final minutes of this film, with how they send off the Warrens to their complication, being based on a true story, this was their last investigation to the case, and involving the daughter and the boyfriend did add a little bit of a twist along the way, but it ultimately felt like it dragged on with so much information that was needed enough to lend the audience some favors, not lead you into things that you're clueless about why things were the way they were, how they fought off the demons by the end. But of course, some of the reasons you go into this film for are for the scares, for the investigation, for how well the Warrens get involved with the case, to which, while yes, some of the other Conjuring films don't really start up until 45 minutes to an hour in when the Warrens are fully involved, the investigations, the possessions, don't necessarily feel like it's well involved enough that the family you get that's being haunted is just so lost within the mix. Things are going on for months on end, but you're not getting so much of that as you are of the Warrens and their plain everyday life, which unfortunately takes a toll on just the viewing experience. While I was engaged enough, I wanted to see how things took a turn, took a full fruition to the haunting that's going on at hand. It just took so much time to focus in on the Warrens and all that's going in on this boyfriend that's leading on into the girlfriend's life, that there's ultimately some pieces of information that felt like the dialogue was a little off-putting at that point, unnatural by the navigation that they were doing. There was a couple minutes lended itself toward a ping pong tournament that didn't ultimately pay off a sacrifice toward the end. And while yes, there could be some means that it's accurate to a depiction of what they were into, it certainly doesn't lend itself favor toward the audience to the engagement of what we ultimately are trying to go in for. And while yes, I am into the character depth, the character building out of some of these stories, ultimately it unfortunately takes too much of that time within that, and so little of the time ends up going into the ending, the actual investigation. Well, I do see some stakes. There is a particular character death that is strong and devastating, and it looks good once it goes on to those moments. Of course, it all goes into the idea that there's too much of the Warrens within this particular case that you don't get to understand the motive, the memorabilia of everything that's going on with the family that is being possessed from this consequence that's going on at hand, which ultimately leaves you confused and muddled by the ultimate experience that you may have experienced from this film as a whole, just leaving you with so many different things where it may not be confusing, it may not be convoluted, everything's clear cut and dry, but it feels like it's still trying to go paint by the numbers. Everything that you expect it to come about becomes predictable because of the information you start at the beginning, and based on the pattern of these films, that information is just done so easily, withdrawn within it. And yes, some of that can be based on the true stories. They wrote a book, so I'm sure there's some of that that is true to the showcase. And even twisting or dramatizing this film for the sake of engagement can make it okay for the sake of making a more horrifying film, but because it took so long to get to that, it just felt like it didn't necessarily know how to really navigate the editing in the best way possible. So that's just my personal thoughts on Conjuring The Last Rites, which I have to rate as simply 5 out of 10. Truly a disappointment to some standard, even if it did navigate itself to a well navigated send off for the Warrens. So let me know down in the comments below what you thought of Conjuring The Last Rites. Was it good? Was it bad? Or somewhere right in the middle. So make sure to like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe if you haven't already to join in film culture community where we talk about the love of cinema as a whole. So that's just all. And make sure to do yourself a favor and go watch a movie.